Hello friends, welcome to the Soviet journey. In this video, I wanted to give you information about food production and culinary culture in the Soviet Union. I wanted to examine together what kind of eating habits there were in the Soviet Union and how food production was done. Culinary culture and food habits have always taken their place in history as an indispensable part of every society. Numerous dietary patterns that have been passed down from generation to generation as a cultural element have been shaped by many factors such as geography, ecology, economic structure, and historical process, and have survived to the present day. When dishes made from similar foods met with cultural elements, tables with countless varieties emerged. Culinary culture has also been deeply affected throughout history due to the impact of historical development processes on many situations. However, in many societies, it was not easy for all people to access rich food. Throughout history, class character has been a determining factor in the formation of culinary culture and people's access to food diversity. With capitalist development, the wealthy classes had unlimited access to their own cultural cuisine, but workers had very limited opportunities because they lived in conditions that could only provide for their livelihood. Moreover, the rich classes had access to the culinary cultures of other societies, but such a situation was not possible for the poor. The new socialist social order implemented in the Soviet Union, unlike the capitalist order, provided free access to countless culinary cultures for all Soviet people. Moreover, as a result of the interactions between many people with different cultures living in peace with each other, their food cultures have rapidly enriched. Soviet cuisine was formed as a result of the fusion of many national and cultural cuisines in the country. Now let's take a look at the development of Soviet culinary culture up to the present day. Before the October Revolution, it was common for the rich to go to luxury restaurants and eat quality food in the Russian Empire. The low-income classes that make up the majority of the population could not eat in these places due to their costs. After the revolution, the majority of these restaurants, which appealed to the bourgeois class, were closed and converted into places with mass functions such as dining halls, cafeterias, and accommodation centers. Women, who were forced to deal with housework until then, were allowed to work alongside men in these large enterprises, and women became a part of the social food culture. Many cooperatives were established to develop food culture. During this period, a soup restaurant was established in Moscow that could serve 3,000 people at a time, and shihi, a traditional Russian soup made from cabbage, was made and distributed to the public. Until the 1930s, fine dining was offered by state institutions at a high quality and low price. In the years leading up to World War II, shihi soup and kasha, a porridge made from buckwheat, were indispensable in dining halls. From the 1930s onwards, the Soviet government's statements that life was becoming better and more joyful were also reflected in the culinary culture. People had the opportunity to easily buy various food products in the established markets. In these places, shopping bags called avoska were on the arm of most Soviet citizens. A large number of artistic pictures were drawn, posters were prepared, films were shot on the subject of harvesting on collective farms and the delivery of products to the table, thus introducing a rich range of food. Collectivization policies were put into effect and production was made mass. During this period, although rich landowners tried to hide, bury, or destroy food crops, Soviet authorities and peoples prevented these attempts and ensured that food products and meals were widely available to the public. The person directly responsible for the food sector was Anastas Mikoyan, the People's Commissar for Industrial Affairs of the Soviet Union, or in the Western sense, the Minister of Industry. Mikoyan made many attempts to introduce Soviet food culture and Soviet cuisine to the Western world. In the 1930s, many new recipes were discovered and distributed to food establishments in mass production. Mikoyan is known as the father of Soviet cuisine for these initiatives. In 1939, the Soviet Union Academy of Sciences published books on food and culinary cultures with the contribution of many chefs, doctors and scientists, and these books were taught in schools as textbooks on healthy and delicious cooking. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, These important works were re-edited and published in Russia. The Nazi attack on the Soviets deeply affected food production. With the beginning of World War II, food diversity decreased in many regions and famine broke out, especially in occupied areas. During the war years, much of the land in rural areas was destroyed, but the destruction only reduced the production capacity. It did not destroy the traditional cuisine eaten in rural areas. Food crops were transported from regions not directly affected by the war, such as Central Asia, to regions with food problems. To solve the grain problem, large amounts of grain were transported from Uzbekistan to other regions. The solidarity of all Soviet peoples is the biggest factor that prevented the extinction of Soviet cuisine. Many food production facilities were rebuilt for the Soviet food sector, which entered a period of recovery after the war. The greatest success was achieved in 1954 with the Virgin Lands project. The project, which covers an area of approximately 300,000 square kilometers in Kazakhstan, Western Siberia and the Altai regions, has achieved great agricultural success. 125 million tons of wheat were produced in 1956 alone. This amount was about 2 times that of the West. In the 1960s, the production and consumption of many types of food such as meat, fish, eggs, vegetables and fruits increased. In the 1980s, as a result of the partial acceptance of competition with perestroika policies, it was emphasized that food should be sold rather than delivered to the public, and it became more difficult to achieve a variety of food until the collapse of the Soviet Union. Soviet cuisine generally has a very rich content. This richness comes from the fact that it hosts many different nations and cultures and that these cultures interact with each other. For example, the culinary culture described as Caucasian cuisine is a combination of many cuisines such as Armenian, Georgian, Azeri, Abkhaz, Avar, Lezgin, Kardabay, Ossetian, Circassian, Chechen, Ingush. Seafood obtained from the regions bordering the Black Sea, where fishing is developed, was transferred to other regions, and many regions that did not have fish in their cuisine culture were introduced to new flavors. In addition to these factors, historical factors have also influenced the culinary culture. The regional migration wave of people during World War is one of these factors. Until the 1920s, there was a great population movement in Russia due to the war, and as a result, dishes eaten in many regions such as Ukraine, the Caucasus, Belarus and Siberia spread to Russia. Examples of these dishes are salo or borscht dishes. Similarly, the Caucasian dish shashlik has become popular in traditional Russian cuisine after the 1970s. As a result of different ethnic groups settling in different regions in Central Asia, the food cultures of other regions were transferred and the variety of food was enriched. Vegetables grown specifically for the region were dried and served on the tables of Soviet citizens living far away from that region. Although the eating habits of Soviet citizens varied greatly, there were also commonalities. The food culture described as eat several times a day and don't eat anything between meals was a general approach, and the eating habit of 4 meals in a row was generally accepted. This situation continues especially in today's Russian culinary culture. The first meal is liquid food such as soup or broth. The second meal consists of meat, fish and side dishes such as potatoes, buckwheat and pasta. The third meal includes drinks such as coffee, milk, kefir, and the fourth meal consists of desserts. Of course, any type of meal could be eaten in any restaurant, but in special dining establishments, such as those for workers or students, there was a meal called combined meal or komplexny obed in Russian. Restaurants called storovaya, corresponding to today's cafes, were popular among Soviet citizens. Food was very cheap in storovayas. You could buy enough food for just 1 ruble. In other words, 100 rubles corresponds to approximately $0.9 in 2024. Roughly speaking, 100 meals are equivalent to $1,500 in the USSR. There were also restaurants called zakuski that served only cold food, but their numbers were fewer than other dining halls. Soviet citizens generally consume tea as a beverage. The preferred type of tea varies for each region. In general, black tea was consumed in Russia, while in Central Asian republics such as Kazakhstan, Altai, Tuva, Buryat, green tea was consumed more. Tea production in Georgia had an important place. The tea produced in the factories here was shipped both abroad and to other Soviet republics. However, as a result of the emergence of nationalist ideas in Georgia from the mid-1980s, tea shipments slowed down. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, the amount of tea imported from Georgia to Russia has decreased significantly. The cola culture, which has been consumed in the Western world for a long time, could not enter the Soviet Union for a long time. Coca-Cola decided to expand its market network outside the USSR in the late 1940s, but European communists opposed cola consumption. During this period, at the request of Soviet Marshal Georgy Zhukov, a colorless version with a red star emblem, called White Cola, was introduced into the country in limited numbers. Coca-Cola planned a project for Russia in 1965, but it failed because the Soviet Union did not allow private companies. The company worked to develop sales channels in cooperation with the Soviet government and sponsored the 1980 Moscow Olympics for this purpose. However, due to the US boycott of the Olympics, the introduction of cola into the Soviet Union failed again. On the other hand, Pepsi-Cola managed to enter the Soviet market in a limited way, and the company was given limited marketing rights in Russia in 1972. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, cola became a drink symbolizing the West in the former Soviet republics. In the 1990s, Coca-Cola began selling its products without any obstacles. Alcohol consumption was not common in the Soviet republics of Central Asia, but was consumed frequently in Russian society. After the October Revolution, excessive alcohol consumption was considered a social problem and campaigns were organized against alcoholism. Until the 1920s, vodka was widely consumed in Russia. In the following years, campaigns were carried out to reduce alcohol consumption, but the expected results were not achieved. During these years, Soviet citizens continued to consume traditional alcohol called kivas and vodka. In the 1980s, similar to the old period, attempts were made to restrict alcoholic beverages, but this did not find much response in society. Yes, comrades, in this video I wanted to give you general information about Soviet cuisine. I have compiled information about this little-known subject and presented it to you. I publish videos like this about little-known topics related to the Soviets. Don't forget to follow and subscribe to our Soviet Journey channel. Also, please don't forget to click the like button. What do you think about the subject? If you have any information to add, please, let's meet in the comments. Goodbye for now. Stay in solidarity.